Hi, everybody. It's Kelly Russell, the Rock Your Joy Coach. Thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to my channel. So, my topic for this week comes from chapter 13 of A Course in Miracles, part 4, The Function of Time. So, I recently had a birthday, and that just inspired me to start thinking about time and what it means and how we use it and how we feel like we don't have enough of it or it's running out or we're wasting it or we're killing it or are we beating the clock or is the clock beating us, right? And whether we're talking about it from the perspective of looking at your life on a birthday and getting older and thinking about the past and what's gone by and all of that, the way that I was considering it, or whether we're thinking about it in terms of the future and sometimes fearing it or having anxiety about it, wondering about it. Either way, we are so preoccupied about time. And it's one of those things when A Course in Miracles tells us that we are too tolerant of mind wandering. This is one of the things that it's talking about, because when you really think about it, we're almost always thinking either about the past and or about the future. And so A Course in Miracles teaches us in this particular section that the way that the ego uses time is to use our past to create our future. And that's what it tells us happens, is that the future is always a result of the past. And so, and when you think about it, it's a really shitty ego dictate, I think, is all of the ego dictates pretty much are. um, because the past is over. And so, in the ego's teaching, we can't do anything about the past. It's already done, and yet it's going to predict our future. It's going to be the cause of our future. So whatever fucked up stuff that we've done in the past is, we're now screwed because we've created this crappy future for ourselves and we got nobody but ourselves to blame. I mean, that's essentially the ego's whole thought system, is guilt, based on guilt. And then how are going to be punished based on our guilt. And so what I love about the way A Course in Miracles looks at time is that the only time there is the present moment. The time is right now, and that there is no past and there is no future. Because if you start with the premise that there is no time, because time is a construct of the world of time and space, and the central teaching of A Course in Miracles is that there is no world, that this is something that is this existence is just being made up in our minds. It's a projection of our unconscious guilt because we believe that we separated from God, and we believe that we needed to find a way to sort of basically run away from him and not be punished by him for our rejection of him, all of which is a complete BS idea, but we bought into it super hard, and we're living the results of our having bought into it by believing that we're in a body in a world of time and space. And so what A Course in Miracles teaches is the way for us to use time is to bring ourselves back to the present moment, to the now, through the practice of true forgiveness, which is, a shift in our perception from fear to love is what the result of that is. And that's what the miracle is. And of course, in Miracles, it is transforming our experience from one of the world of time and space to one that transcends the world of time and space and brings us into a holy instant, which is right now. And it is the moment in which you forgive whatever you believe is disturbing your peace, whatever you believe is guilty and is at fault and is responsible for you not being in joy and in peace and in love. It's when you practice forgiveness. It usually has something to do with a brother. And it's when you practice forgiveness toward that brother for what they didn't do. Because if this world is again, if this world is a made up projection in our minds, then nobody's really doing anything and nobody's guilty of anything. And the thing about that is, if we're holding someone else guilty, then we're holding ourselves in guilt. Because and this is something that is just, it's part of the psychological knowledge of this world, is that when you hold another person in guilt or blame, it reverberates onto you. You hold yourself in that same guilt and blame for blaming them. Like a boomerang effect. You can't avoid it. It's the way that it works. And so we release ourselves as we release our brothers. And so why is this so important? Why not just carry resentment around and just, revel and bask in how pissed off we are and how something is somebody else's fault all the time and what victims we are of what everybody has done to us? Well, two reasons. And these have to do with the function of time. So A Course in Miracles talks about the concept of collapsing time and what collapsing time means. And it benefits us in two humongous ways, in my opinion. So it puts us into what is called vertical perception. So because we come into the world and the ego mind, is already stamps us as guilty. In the ego mind's teaching, if you could call it teaching, our original sin is separating from God. So we never did that. It never happened, but we believe we did. And so we carry this deeply buried, like soul level feeling of unconscious guilt that we're bad. We're sinful because we separated from God. We rejected God. We told God to buck off. And that is what is at the basis of then everything that seems to happen in the world that feels negative or painful or difficult or challenging to us, is that we set these things up in the world. We set up these experiences. We set up these, and it comes from a place far beyond our conscious mind in this world. I want to make sure that I say that, so that we're not holding ourselves responsible for, I must have just sat around in some place in time that I don't remember in this world and decided to have all these things happen to me. No, it's at a level that is beyond our conscious mind here, but we still have to take responsibility for the fact that we participated in this by believing that we are guilty. We then set ourselves up with all of these essentially punishment experiences that we were scheduled to go through in our dream lifetime here. So whatever those things were, for myself, I can think of it as unhappy marriages and divorces and accidents and scarcity and losses and, emotional pain, anxiety, littleness, lack, whatever, on and on. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's all the same thing. It's all just a projection of unconscious guilt, and it shows up in various ways in the body, in sickness, in conflict in relationships, in loss of jobs or income or whatever. There's a myriad of ways. The ego is very miscreative in the ways in which it can teach us to punish ourselves. And so we have all these things that we've set up. So the practice of forgiveness, as we're going along this continuum of our life, when we practice forgiveness, it literally picks us up vertically, and not in chronological time, but in the time as it is measured in these punishment experiences that we've set up. It moves us along the continuum and drops us back down at a place, and so that those in that interim, whatever we had set up for ourselves to go through that was a punishing experience is collapsed. That's what collapsing time means. We don't have to experience what we had set up for ourselves to experience, because our practice of true forgiveness, of freeing our brother from what we were holding him guilty for, thus freeing ourselves from that same guilt, means we're dissolving it, and there's no need to punish ourselves. And so as we practice forgiveness, that collapse keeps happening all along the continuum of our lives, which means the more we practice that forgiveness, the less opportunities we have for suffering. So I call that a win, and that's a big old reason why I practice forgiveness as much as I can let myself practice it. I think it would be a good idea to just do it 24/7, although we don't have to forgive the things that are fun and that we have a good time at, and that we appreciate, and that are beautiful. And we're really forgiving whatever disturbs our peace in any way, whatever grievances that we have. So the second way that is, in my opinion, even more awesome is as a result of practicing that forgiveness, and as a result of collapsing time in that way, what ends up happening as a result is we collapse time, we collapse those experiences that we've set up for ourselves so much, because we have undone our unconscious guilt to the point that there is no more guilt left in our minds, unconscious or otherwise, and all that is left is love. And so the only time there is the present moment, because when we think of the past and we think of the future, time, those concepts of time are connected to guilt. They're connected to what we did in the past and what we're afraid of as a result in the future. And so when we just stay present with right now, and right now is all love, and right now I'm not holding anybody in any kind of blame or guilt or responsible for my unhappiness in any way. This is where Jesus was at the end of his life. This is why he was able to practice that true forgiveness toward people who were torturing his body. It's the reason why he didn't feel pain. It's the reason why he was teaching that it wasn't about the resurrection. It was about the it wasn't about the crucifixion. It was about the resurrection. It was about the realization and the recognition that the body is nothing. The body is not us. It's not who we are. It doesn't represent our life. It can be used as a beautiful lesson in communion, until communion is, as A Course in Miracles teaches. We can use the body to be able to practice forgiveness, to be able to practice that being in that vertical perception, undoing and unwinding the ego, dissolving our unconscious guilt, and that is really what the purpose of the body is here. It is as a communication device, as a learning instrument. And so that's really what that results in is, when there's no more guilt, then there's no more sense of birth and death. There's no more belief in the world of time and space. There's no more reason for us to keep projecting that guilt onto this world, and then keep appearing to come back to it in lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And so it's the end of reincarnation. It's the end of coming back here for yet another experience. And instead, our awareness is in the home we never left. It's at home with God, with all of our brothers, where we never left. This whole thing is a giant hallucination, but it's a hallucination that feels very real, and it's going to continue to feel very real lifetime after lifetime if we don't practice this way of undoing our unconscious guilt. If we don't adopt this process of true forgiveness, which is not a hard thing to do. The only reason it's hard to do is if we hold our brothers in guilt and we don't want to do it because we don't think they deserve it. But the problem with that is we don't think they deserve it. We don't think we deserve it, because whatever we're extending to our brothers, whether it is love or whether it is attack, whether it's guilt, blame, whatever we're extending is exactly what we're extending to ourselves. And so the more that we practice more that we practice forgiveness and undo that unconscious guilt, the more we're extending that love to ourselves. And when we have nothing but love left in our minds, there's no more reason to think that this world exists. And it dissolves, it disappears. It's like it never was. And we're just back in oneness, in eternal bliss and love and peace and joy and awesomeness where we never left. So I think that's the best reason in my mind to practice forgiveness. And that is what Holy Spirit's purpose for time is, the function of time. So I say, let's put the fun back in the function of time, and let's make that forgiveness practice not just a daily thing, but as often as you possibly can when you realize your peace is disturbed. And so that's my message for you today, is to understand what the function of time really is, and to make the decision, if you don't want to keep experiencing difficult and painful and challenging things happening in this life, if you want to find a way to reduce your suffering and to have a happy dream here. It's still going to be a dream until we completely undo our unconscious guilt, but it can be a happy dream instead of a nightmare. Then this is the way to do it. So thanks again so much for joining me today. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so by clicking the button below. And if you'd like to take a deeper dive into being able to live the concepts that are presented in the Course in Miracles, and being able to really have like more loving relationships, have a happier dream in all of the senses that I talked about, and being able to walk through this world, just being able to see the joy and experience the peace and feel the love, then consider doing private coaching with me. And there's a button below you can click on to have a free discovery session, which is a free coaching call to experience how I work. And there's also a few more free goodies that are attached to the links below. So I'm here every week talking about the practical application of A Course in Miracles, and I'll see you next week. I love you.